The time my crazy old neighbor called CPS on my family. Posted by you/NotYourBusiness789. Let me preface this by saying that my family is about as normal and boring as they come. We're not perfect, but we're decent people. We bake cookies for new neighbors, wave to mail carriers, and recycle religiously. My parents are both teachers, and I have two younger siblings, ages 9 and 6 at the time this started, who are sweet kids, not troublemakers. But somehow, that didn't stop our neighbor, let's call her Ms. Kravitz, because if you've seen Bewitched, you know, from becoming convinced that we were criminals, monsters, and child abusers all rolled into one. So here's how it all began. We moved into our current home 3 summers ago. It's a nice suburban area, tree-lined streets, good schools, kids riding bikes, dogs barking, the whole suburban starter pack. Our house sits on a quiet cul-de-sac with maybe 6 other houses. Everything seemed fine at first. Neighbors waved, a couple of them came by to say hello. And then came Ms. Kravitz. She lived directly across from us in this faded yellow ranch-style home with a garden that could only be described as chaotic neutral. You could tell it had once been beautiful, but now it was just overgrown. Like she'd started gardening and then forgotten what she was doing halfway through and decided to wage war on weeds instead. The first time we met her, she was standing in our yard. Not near the edge, like, in the yard, inspecting our mailbox. When my dad walked up and said hello, she barely looked up and went, "Did you install this box yourself?" What? Dad told her no, it came with the house. She then informed him, with the tone of someone delivering news of a death, that it was a foot too close to the sidewalk, and that she could call the HOA about it. Spoiler, we don't have an HOA. We laughed it off. Weird but harmless, right? Oh, how wrong we were. A week after moving in, we got a knock on our door. It was a police officer. Nothing serious, he was polite and even a little embarrassed. Apparently, someone had called in a noise complaint. At 3 p.m. on a Saturday. Because my little brother and sister were laughing too loudly while playing in the backyard sprinkler. The officer apologized and said it was clearly nothing, but he was required to check. We didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out who'd made the call. Ms. Kravitz was standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching like a hawk that just found a mouse with unpaid HOA dues. Things only escalated from there. She'd bang on the fence with a broom when the kids were in the yard, claiming they were harassing her cat. Her cat, by the way, was this fat orange tabby that sat in our garden beds all day and looked like he'd lost the will to live. If we had guests over, she'd come over and complain about unauthorized parking. If our trash bins weren't pulled in by 8:01 a.m. the next morning, she'd leave sticky notes on them that said things like, "Pests are attracted to laziness." But all of that was just annoying neighbor stuff. The real nightmare began 6 months after we moved in. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was my younger sister's birthday, and we had just started setting up the backyard for a small party. Balloons, folding table, simple stuff. Nothing loud or wild. Then the doorbell rang. My mom opened it and standing there were 2 people holding clipboards and wearing polite, strained smiles. CPS. They said they'd received an anonymous tip about unsafe conditions for minors in the home. I was in the living room and I could see my mom's face go white. She invited them in because, well, we had nothing to hide. The social workers were actually very nice. They checked the kids' rooms, the fridge, asked my siblings some basic questions. After about an hour, they concluded that the report seemed unsubstantiated. But they also told us that due to protocol, the report would be on file, and if another came in, they'd be obligated to follow up. And just like that, Ms. Kravitz escalated from nuisance to threat. My dad, ever the diplomatic one, decided to go talk to her. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe she really thought something was wrong, and if we explained things, she'd stop. Bad idea. He walked over, introduced himself, again, and said that we'd had a visit from CPS and he was concerned someone might be making false reports. She smiled, and said, "Well, children can't advocate for themselves, can they? Someone has to." Dad came back looking like he'd bitten into a lemon. "That woman is off her rocker," he muttered. From then on, it was a game of whack-a-mole. CPS came again 3 weeks later. This time for a claim that our children were being left alone for hours at a time. It was during a period when my mom was on leave and home literally 24/7. Again, unfounded. But the stress was starting to wear on all of us. The kids were asking questions. My sister started getting scared every time the doorbell rang. And even I, a skeptical teenager who spent most of my time online, was getting paranoid. We even got a Ring doorbell cam installed, just in case. We started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages from school, timestamps of outings, even keeping logs of where the kids were throughout the day. We were preparing for war, even though we hadn't wanted one. Little did we know, we were just getting started. Ms. Kravitz wasn't even close to being done. So, where were we? Right. We just had our second CPS visit in less than a month, thanks to Ms. Kravitz and her crusade to protect the children from a stable, loving, mildly boring suburban household. By this point, my parents were done playing nice. We weren't going full scorched earth just yet, but the gloves were off. Everything was documented. Every incident, every weird encounter, every time she glared at us from her porch like the eye of Sauron, we had it on video or in a notebook. And we needed it. Because visit number 3 was coming. It was early December, right after a snowstorm. The kids were outside in the yard, bundled up like tiny marshmallow people, making snow angels and trying to build a snowman that looked more like a snow blob with personality disorder. My mom and I were in the kitchen baking cookies. Like, Hallmark movie levels of domestic peace. Then, a knock on the door. I checked the Ring camera. CPS again. This time, they were responding to a report that said our children were locked outside in freezing temperatures without supervision. That we had neglected to provide proper winter clothing. Oh, and that there was yelling and emotional abuse heard from the home. Yeah. My siblings were literally wearing brand new North Face jackets, waterproof snow boots, gloves, hats, scarves, the whole ensemble. My mom had just bought it all during a Black Friday sale. She even had the receipts. The CPS worker this time was less friendly. Professional, but clearly wary. My parents were cooperative, as usual, but I could see the shift in my mom. Something had snapped. She was polite, but icy. The kind of polite that says, "I'm smiling so I don't scream." She asked the worker point blank, "How many reports does it take before someone investigates the person filing them?" The worker looked uncomfortable. She said the reports were anonymous, and that unfortunately, unless the reports were proven to be malicious or clearly false, they had to respond. She also quietly admitted that multiple calls in a short period can raise red flags, but CPS has to walk a very careful line. Too cautious, and they miss real abuse. Too reactive, and people like us get steamrolled. But she did say something that changed everything. "We're not allowed to tell you who filed the reports, but we can tell you that every report came from the same phone number." Boom. That was all we needed. My dad called a lawyer the next day. Not to sue Ms. Kravitz, yet, but to start protecting ourselves legally. The lawyer helped us draft a cease and desist letter that, while not naming her directly, clearly stated that any further false reports, harassment, or trespassing would be pursued legally. We also installed more security cameras, visible ones. One pointed directly at the street. One aimed at our front porch. Another covering the backyard. It felt like overkill, but it wasn't. Because that night, Ms. Kravitz made her boldest move yet. Around 2:30 in the morning, our motion sensor light in the backyard went on. I was up late, thanks, insomnia, and I checked the live feed on my phone out of habit. And there she was. Ms. Kravitz. In our backyard. In a bathrobe. Holding what looked like a flashlight and a notebook. I watched in absolute disbelief as she walked up to our back window, peered in, and started writing something down. Probably taking notes on what brand of milk we buy or how many fruit snacks were on the counter. I shook my dad awake like, "You gotta see this. She's literally outside." By the time we got downstairs, she was gone. But we had it all on camera. Crystal clear. Ms. Kravitz casing our house like a wannabe neighborhood spy. We called the police. This time, they took it seriously. The officer came by, reviewed the footage, and nodded slowly like, yup, that's not normal behavior. We told him about the repeated CPS reports and the letter our lawyer had drafted. He agreed it sounded like harassment and trespassing, but he couldn't arrest her that night unless we wanted to press charges. We didn't. Yet. But he did go over to her house and have a little chat. According to the officer, who came back to update us, she claimed she'd heard suspicious activity and was checking on the children's well-being. At 2:30 a.m. In our yard. Apparently she said, and I quote, "Well, someone has to care about them." The officer warned her that if she stepped foot on our property again, she'd be charged with trespassing. Her response: "Good. Let them take me to court. Maybe then someone will listen to me." Okay, crazy lady. At this point, the neighborhood was starting to take notice. Other neighbors had begun talking. Turns out, we weren't the first family she'd targeted. She'd made complaints about suspicious gardening at another house, and once called animal control because she thought someone's labradoodle looked too thin. We weren't dealing with a one-off nut job. We were dealing with a career-level busybody with a savior complex and no filter. And she still wasn't done. Because not even a week later, she made one more CPS call. The worst one yet. Business 789. If you're just joining, here's the gist. We moved into a new neighborhood. Our neighbor, Ms. Kravitz, not her real name but very much her vibe, decided we were abusive parents for reasons. She's now called CPS on us 3 times and was caught sneaking into our yard at 2:30 a.m. to take notes. We've involved a lawyer, got security cameras, and the police have officially warned her. You'd think this would slow her down. It didn't. It was just after New Year's. My little brother had a bad cold, nothing serious, just the usual sniffles, juice boxes, and snot tissues everywhere. He was home from school for 2 days. During that time, my mom posted a few pics to her Instagram story, private account, only friends and family, of my siblings on the couch watching movies, under a pile of blankets with popsicles and cartoons. That's it. That was the crime. 4 days later, bam. Doorbell. Ring cam shows it's CPS again. But this time, it's 2 agents and a police officer. Immediate pit in the stomach. They ask to come inside. My mom calmly lets them in, asks what this is about. They say they received a detailed report alleging the children were being kept home while ill, without medical attention. That the home reeked of neglect and sickness. That the children appeared drugged or sedated in posted photos. And, brace yourselves, that my parents were intentionally keeping the children sick to avoid school and gain attention online. I couldn't believe it. Munchausen by proxy levels of accusation. This lady went full Lifetime movie villain. The CPS agents were actually kind. They were calm, very thorough, but clearly saw the discrepancy between the call and the reality. They asked about the photos. My mom showed them the stories, still saved in her phone, timestamps, and even offered our pediatrician's contact info to verify the sick day. They spoke to my siblings, again. The kids were their usual selves, sweet, talkative, and very not drugged. The fridge was stocked. The house was clean. It smelled like chicken noodle soup and Lysol. Not a single red flag in sight. But they told us something that chilled me. The report included your Instagram story screenshots. That meant one of 2 things. Someone we know was feeding info to Ms. Kravitz. Ms. Kravitz had created a fake account, gotten accepted, and was stalking us online. Either way, it was next-level disturbing. The officer, who, thank God, was the same one who had warned her weeks earlier, pulled my dad aside and said something like, "This is beyond normal behavior. If you're ready to press charges, we'll back you." So we did. Our lawyer filed for a restraining order based on repeated harassment, false reporting, trespassing, and stalking. We also submitted all the ring footage, including her in our yard at 2:30 a.m. Every note she'd left. A log of every CPS visit. Screenshots of the false claims and the original IG posts. Affidavits from neighbors who had also had problems with her. Apparently, once our lawyer got things rolling, CPS themselves flagged her as a serial false reporter. Which, it turns out, is an actual thing. After enough unfounded reports, especially with proof of malicious intent, they can take legal action or refuse to investigate future claims from the same source. The restraining order was granted. She was legally barred from contacting us directly or indirectly, stepping foot on our property, filming, photographing, or recording us, reporting us to CPS without concrete evidence. If she violated any of those, she'd face immediate consequences. But the best part? She didn't know we had already gone to court. Because we didn't serve her notice, the sheriff did. At 7 a.m., 2 officers knocked on her door and served her the paperwork. She tried to play confused, but I'm just a concerned neighbor, but they weren't buying it. One officer later told us she looked genuinely shocked and tried to play victim. Typical. For about a week, everything was silent. 7 days after being served, she broke the restraining order. We caught her on camera, again, standing across the street filming our front yard. Just standing there with her little phone out like she was collecting evidence for the FBI. The video showed her filming, zooming in, walking up to the curb, and mumbling something like, "Just wait, someone will listen." Our lawyer sent that footage to the police. She was arrested that evening. Yes. Actually arrested. Trespassing and violating a restraining order. She spent the night in jail and got fined. The judge later tacked on mandatory therapy and community service. And just like that, our reign of terror was over. Or, so we thought. Because one last twist was waiting for us. And it would be the thing that finally exposed what really made Ms. Kravitz tick. So after months of harassment, fake CPS reports, stalking, and a 2:30 a.m. garden stakeout, we finally got justice. Ms. Kravitz got hit with a restraining order. She broke it like a genius and was arrested. CPS flagged her as a malicious false reporter. The entire neighborhood was done with her. But like any good horror movie villain, she wasn't gone for good. Not yet. This last chapter isn't just about karma, it's about why this happened in the first place. Because we finally found out, and it was heavy. After her arrest, Ms. Kravitz kind of disappeared. Not literally, she still lived in her fading yellow house across the street, but she went full hermit mode. Curtains closed. No gardening. No notes. No yelling. No broom banging on the fence. Honestly, it was kind of eerie. Like the boss level was defeated but her ghost was still glitching out in the background. Neighbors started talking more openly. Turns out she'd been making people uncomfortable for years, especially newer families with young kids. One couple a few houses down had actually moved out after she accused them of training their toddler to spy on her. I wish I was joking. But then, out of nowhere, about 2 months after her arrest, we got a knock on the door. Not CPS this time. It was a woman, maybe in her early 40s. Dressed nicely. She introduced herself as Julia. And then she dropped the bomb. "I'm Ms. Kravitz's daughter." Cue awkward silence and a collective eyebrow raise from our entire family. She quickly reassured us, she wasn't there to defend her mom. In fact, she looked tired. Sad. She said she was only in town for a few days and had just found out everything that had happened. She'd seen the legal paperwork, the police reports, everything. And then she told us the story. Apparently, years ago, long before we moved in, Ms. Kravitz did have a family. A husband, 2 kids, Julia being the youngest, a stable life. But then tragedy hit hard and fast. Her older child, Julia's brother, died suddenly at 14. An undiagnosed heart condition. It shattered her. According to Julia, Ms. Kravitz spiraled into grief and never truly came out. She got obsessed with child safety, convinced herself that danger was everywhere. Their home turned into a prison of rules, routines, and paranoia. Eventually, Julia left home at 18 and never came back. Her father left a few years later, and Ms. Kravitz was alone in that house, clinging to her grief and spiraling deeper into delusions. Julia said she'd always suspected her mom had some kind of untreated mental illness, paranoid delusions, maybe a form of PTSD, but she refused help. Refused therapy. And over the years, the obsession just fixated outward. On other people's children. Other families. Our family. You moved in with happy, healthy kids, Julia said, tearing up. That triggered something in her. I think she thought, if she could save someone else's child, maybe it would undo what happened. We didn't know what to say. It was tragic. Still infuriating, but suddenly more complex. Julia apologized, over and over. She said she'd hired a local elder care case manager, someone to check in on her mom and monitor behavior. Apparently, her arrest and court-ordered therapy had finally gotten through to her a little. She agreed to let someone help. Baby steps, but still. My parents thanked Julia for coming by. For her honesty. We told her we didn't wish harm on her mom, just peace. For all of us. She left crying. That was almost a year ago. Since then, things have been peaceful. Ms. Kravitz still lives across the street, but she keeps to herself. No more reports. No more notes. Sometimes we catch her watching from the window, but she doesn't do anything. Her yard is still overgrown, but once in a while we see someone, probably the case manager or a helper, tending it. Quietly. Gently. Our cameras are still up, just in case. But we're not afraid anymore. The kids are doing great. My sister is now weirdly into legal dramas and says she wants to be a lawyer when she grows up, so thanks for that, I guess, Ms. K. And our family? We're stronger. Closer. Slightly more paranoid, yes, but also weirdly grateful. Because in the end, we learned how to fight back. How to protect each other. And how to stand up to someone, even if they think they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. TLDR. Our neighbor went full psycho, calling CPS on us multiple times, stalked us, trespassed, and nearly ruined our lives, until we lawyered up, pressed charges, and found out she was a grieving, untreated woman still haunted by the past. Now she's quiet. And we're healing. And that's the story. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. You're the real MVP. Let me know if you want bonus details like the ring footage, what was in her notebook, oh yeah, we found out, or how my little brother tried to name the snowman Detective Noodle. Reddit, stay safe out there. And maybe be nice to your mailman. You never know who your neighbor's watching. Let me know if you want a short version for a different subreddit like r/best of Redditor updates or something juicy like a, where are they now, bonus post.